Hi, good day everyone. I hope you are excited as I am to introduce you to the story of Aeneid, which is based on a Greek mythology. So let's first be acquainted to as what type of a masterpiece Aeneid is and the years of author's composition. So the Aeneid is a classic, long lofty style narrative poem about a hero's exploits. The hero is Aeneas, a Trojan fated for establishing a new civilization in Italy. The work contains 12 books which are actually has long chapters. From 30 to 19 BC, Vergil, the one who wrote the Aeneid, the language of the epic is Latin, spoken during the days of Vergil and later in the Roman Empire. So moving on to the story, let me have a quick mythology background on why and how Aeneid's story happened. So let's meet Helen. Helen is a feminine beauty reaches its zenith in the Asian Mediterranean world at Helen, wife of King Menelaus of Greece. Her wondrous face and body are flawless and she is completely fine. And here, Aphrodite. I know you've been familiar with the name since it has the Roman counterpart, namely Venus. Aphrodite, the goddess of sexual love and beauty. When Aphrodite comes and competes in a beauty contest with other goddesses, in which a golden apple is to be awarded as the prize, she bribes the judge, a young Trojan named Paris, offering him Helen for his vote. So after Paris selects Aphrodite, he is directed by the goddess to Menelaus' household, where he was wooed by Helen and absconds with her to Troy, a walled city in Asia Minor, which is in today's known as Turkey. So the elopement or the abduction of Queen Helen of Sparta by Trojan Prince Paris constitute an affront to all Greeks. How dare an upstart Trojan steal one of its king's daughters? Infuriated, King Menelaus and his friends are gathering a mighty army, which includes the country's finest warriors. Take note, class, that what I am discussing is a tiny part of this story adventure called Iliad, which later you will encounter. So to continue, they cross the sea together in 1,000 ships to wage war on Troy and take back their pride and of course Helen. After 10 years of fighting, the Greeks present a gift of a giant wooden horse to the Trojans, claiming that they have been given up the fight and they are heading back to the Greece. While prophetess Cassandra and prophet Laocoon warn against accepting the gift, however, it is still dragged into the city by the Trojans. So at night, Greek warriors hide in the horse Vota. It is a French term for belly, falling down through a trapdoor and opening Troy's gates. So the Greeks pour in, slaughter most of the Trojans, and lay in the city waste. Aeneas, the Aeneid's principal character, escapes with his father and son, and after his wife dies in the burning town. The Aeneid takes up the tale of Aeneas, who was supposed to establish a new civilization. Hearing that brief mythological background, that's quite led us to the story of Aeneid. So first, watch this video summary of what is Aeneid all about. Watch comprehensively because later there will be questions that tend to measure how you understand the video lecture.
The epic poem, the Aeneid, begins after the fall of Troy. In the introduction, the Trojan fleet carrying the surviving warriors is being battered by a storm in the Mediterranean Sea, south of Sicily, sent by Juno, queen of the gods, who holds a grudge against the Trojans and their leader, Aeneas. The sea god Neptune guides their ships to shore. They discover they are near the city of Carthage, ruled by Queen Dido, who welcomes them. The Trojans have been traveling since Troy was destroyed. Worried that Aeneas, her son, will have no place to rest, the goddess Venus makes Dido fall passionately in love with him. In the rising action, Aeneas tells Dido the epic story of their travels so far, beginning with the destruction of Troy. Dido, impressed by Aeneas and his feats, succumbs to her feelings for him. Hoping it will keep Aeneas out of Italy and prevent his fate, Juno maneuvers Dido into having sex with Aeneas. However, it is not an official marriage, and Aeneas, remembering his fate and duty, abandons her. Dido is terribly distraught and climbs her funeral pyre where her dead body will burn and fatally stabs herself with his sword as he sails away. The Trojan fleet stops again in Sicily, just in time to celebrate the first anniversary of Anchises' death, and they make sacrifices and feast before the games of speed and skill. After Anchises' ghost appears, telling his son to set sail and visit him in the underworld. Aeneas and the Sibyl, an oracle, journey through the underworld, eventually reuniting with Anchises in the Elysian fields. Anchises shows his son many of his Roman descendants who will build the Roman Empire. The Trojans finally find the Tiber River, where they are meant to settle. Aeneas sends an envoy to make peace with the king of Latium. Following a prophecy, King Latinus offers his daughter, Lavinia, in marriage. But before the deal can be made, Juno sends the fury of rage hither and yon to rouse Italy to war with the Trojans. Turnus gathers allies, and Aeneas needs to find allies of his own to fight with him. After many dramatic battles, the climax of the Aeneid sees Turnus kill Prince Pallas with a spear to his chest. Fatefully, Turnus takes Pallas's sword belt to wear as a trophy. Aeneas, enraged by the news of Pallas's death, finally frees the Trojan fort. During the falling action, after even more back-and-forth battles, Turnus unsuccessfully tries to trap Aeneas and the other half of his army, and the warrior princess Camilla defends the city. Camilla is deadly, but she gets distracted, allowing a spear to get through her defenses and kill her. Turnus agrees to single combat with Aeneas. In the resolution of the epic poem, Turnus is no match for Aeneas and is bested in combat. Aeneas is about to grant mercy when he sees Turnus is wearing Pallas's sword belt. In a blaze of fury, Aeneas stabs Turnus through the heart and becomes ruler of Latium. Though it's filled with innumerable mortal and god figures, the Aeneid has only a handful of main characters. The first is Aeneas. Aeneas is the hero of the Aeneid, and he's honorable, pious, measured, generous, and responsible. And like many heroes, he carries divine blood. His mother is the goddess Venus, so he's big, handsome, and supernaturally strong. However, Vergil gives him human faults as well. At times, Aeneas is unsure or conflicted, and he can get carried away by his feelings. Aeneas has an important fate awaiting him. A fictional hero written into historical battles, he's destined to found the line of leaders in Italy that develops into Romans. The goddess Juno is Aeneas' main antagonist, opposing him from start to finish. She never stops scheming to try to prevent Aeneas' fate. Her enmity for the Trojans springs from losing a contest between goddesses to choose who was most beautiful. Frustrated in her marriage to Jupiter, she is jealous, vengeful, and holds a grudge. But her powers cannot change Aeneas' destiny, which has been set by the fates. Turnus is the primary hero for the Latin forces that fight Aeneas in Italy. Like Aeneas, he's large, attractive, unusually strong, and the son of a goddess, a more minor one. He fights heroically in battle. But unlike Aeneas, he's impulsive and arrogant, with an exaggerated sense of his own importance. Turnus represents the destiny of those who arrogantly oppose the power of Rome. They will be defeated. Queen Dido is pushed by Aeneas' mother Venus and Juno, Carthage's own patron goddess, into a love for Aeneas that is very close to madness. Aeneas' fate inevitably takes him away, and the madness drives Dido to dramatic suicide. Vergil also gives her death historical consequences, attributing it as the root of the long conflict between Carthage and Rome. Dido is a memorable symbol of the tragic consequences when the careless will of the gods conflicts with the inevitability of fate. Anchises is Aeneas' father. Wise and strong in character, he always does what he thinks is best for his son. He isn't always right. He too displays human failings, but he is clearly the source of Aeneas' values. He exemplifies the Roman ideal of respect and honor for family in the all-important relationship between a father and a son. Jupiter is the king of the gods, and he manages other gods and mediates between them when there's conflict. He is responsible for ensuring that what the fates have predicted comes to pass, sooner or later. He indulges his wife Juno and his daughter Venus in their efforts up to a point. Vergil portrays him as mostly calm and measured, in contrast to Juno's vengeful anger, and as the enforcer of Aeneas' fate. Jupiter supports its inevitability. Venus is Aeneas' mother and his most ardent supporter. She repeatedly advocates on behalf of her son and intervenes in events to protect Aeneas as much or more than Juno intervenes to obstruct him. Like all the gods, she doesn't think about how her meddling affects other mortals. Venus represents the spectrum of love, from parental to passionate. Fire, the magical golden bow, the shield of Aeneas, and the gates of war are the most important symbols in the Aeneid. Fire is an uncontrollable force in the poem, symbolizing both destruction and inspiration. It physically destroys Troy and damages the Trojan ships in Sicily, and figuratively describes the fury of battle that obscures even Aeneas' rational thinking and mercy. Also, Dido is driven to suicide by her love for Aeneas, burning herself on a giant pyre. But fire is also a symbol of destiny and inspiration. Next is the golden bow, a symbol of Aeneas' extraordinary and inevitable fate. To enter the underworld, he must find and pluck this bow, and he will only be able to do so if fate allows it. Like his fate, his access to the bow has already been determined. The shield of Aeneas is another important symbol. This shield is made by the fire god Vulcan and is engraved with images of Roman history, which have not happened yet in the epic's time frame. Because these events happened in Vergil's time, they're inevitable as Aeneas' future. The shield functions as a symbol of the destiny of Rome and Aeneas' fate, while simultaneously ensuring Aeneas' fate by protecting him in battle. The gates of war were symbolically opened during wartime and closed in times of peace. In Book 7, Vergil places an early version of the gates of war in Latium. Jupiter predicts in Book 1 that the gates of war are destined to be bolted shut, symbolizing the long and peaceful rule that Vergil envisions for Caesar Augustus and successors. The epic poem The Aeneid is rife with important themes, most notably the inevitability of fate, the destiny of Rome, honor and respect, and the will of the gods. A person's destiny is determined by the Fates, three goddesses who spin, measure, and cut the thread of life. And once set, even the gods cannot change fate. Aeneas' inevitable fate is to found a new city in Italy that builds the groundwork for the city of Rome and the Roman Empire. This theme primarily glorifies Rome, but hopes for the inevitable fate of the Roman Empire to be a long and peaceful future. Some characters try to alter the course of Aeneas' fate, especially the goddess Juno, who repeatedly uses her divine powers to cause trouble for him. But she only manages to lengthen and twist Aeneas' path to his fate, not block it. Of course, Aeneas' fate is supported by his family, especially his father, his mother, the goddess Venus, and all his fellow Trojans. Another important theme is the destiny of Rome. The most obvious purpose of the Aeneid is to glorify the history of Rome and its leader, Caesar Augustus. But Vergil also laid out his own purposes, making a case for peace by highlighting the dangers and costs of war and demonstrating the traits of an ideal Roman. Aeneas' fate is inextricably linked to the destiny of Rome. By placing this legendary hero into a historical framework, Vergil uses his heroic qualities to explain the historical rise of Rome up to his time and to predict the continued greatness of the Roman Empire into the future. Another key theme is honor and respect. Aeneas is repeatedly called pious, a concept that encompassed much more than paying respect to the gods in Roman culture. Piety also includes honoring and being mindful of one's duties to family and country. However, Aeneas' great piety can be overcome, at least temporarily, by passion and anger, especially at the end of the poem, when his rage over Pallas' death prompts him to kill Turnus rather than show him mercy, ignoring his father's directive to spare the defeated. Vergil seems to be warning readers about the dangers of war and acting in anger and vengeance. Most of the conflict in the Aeneid is caused by the changing will of the gods. Far from being infallible, the gods of Rome, like their Greek counterparts, act more like squabbling children than higher beings. In this frame, Vergil seems to invite the reader to question whether or not the gods merit the respect they demand of human beings, a consideration that would not have been alien to philosophical considerations of Romans at the time. Unfortunately, the gods also have a lot of power, so they can cause great trouble. But as powerful as the gods are, it cannot be overstated that they can't change fate.
The storyline was amazing, so I know you don't get bored while watching it. So let's now discuss Aeneid's plot diagram. So in the beginning of the story, on the Mediterranean Sea, Aeneas and his fellow Trojans flee from their home city of Troy, which has been destroyed by the Greeks. They sail for Italy, where Aeneas is destined to found Rome. As they near their destination, a fierce storm throws them off course and lands them in Carthage. Dido, Carthage founder and queen, welcomes them. Aeneas relates to Dido the long and painful story of his group's travels thus far. For the rising action, since the epic has two parts, Aeneas' wanderings in books 1 to 6 and his struggle to establish himself in Latium in books 7 to 12 in the first half of the epic, Aeneas tells the story of the siege of Troy and his escape, causing Dido to love him. In the second half of the epic, King Latinus offers the hand of his daughter Lavinia to Aeneas in marriage, and Juno responds by inciting rage in the hearts of Queen Amata and Turnus and then opening the gates of war. The climax of the story was when Venus and Juno attempt to trap Dido and Aeneas in a cave during a hunting trip in the first half of the epic, and the two lovers conclude their affair. Turnus destroys Pallas in the second half of the epic, sparking Aeneas' deadly revenge. At Mercury's prodding in the first half of the epic, Aeneas leaves Carthage for Italy, prompting the heartbroken Dido to kill herself. The battle between the Trojans and the Latins in the second half is down to duel between Aeneas and Turnus. Aeneas wins, and having considered saving the life of his rival, he chooses to destroy Turnus to avenge the death of Pallas. The epic ends abruptly with the slaying of Turnus after Jove has forbidden interferences by any of the immortals. But throughout the epic, the oracles and prophecies make the future of Aeneas in Italy quite clear. Moreover, through later vignettes, Vergil gives glimpses of Aeneas and Ascanius as future leaders in peacetime. As you can notice in the story, the major conflict in the story is Aeneas is destined to move from Troy's ruins to Italy, where he will set up a race leading to Rome's creation. Juno, harboring feelings of revenge against the Trojan, impedes the task of Aeneas by stirring romance between Aeneas and Dido, and then a war between the Trojans and the Latins, causing misery for the hero, his fleet, and those whom they encounter on the way. And down to the characters of the story, of course we have Aeneas, the titular protagonist of the Aeneid. Aeneas is a survivor of the siege of Troy, a city on the coast of Asia Minor. His defining characteristic is piety, a respect for the will of the gods. He is a fearsome warrior and a leader able to motivate his men in the face of adversity, but also a man capable of great compassion and sorrow. His destiny is to found the Roman race in Italy, and he subordinates all other concerns to this mission. The Aeneid is about his journey from Troy to Italy, which enables him to fulfill his fate. Next is Anchises, Aeneas' father, and a symbol of Aeneas' Trojan heritage. Although Anchises dies during the journey from Troy to Italy, he continues in spirit to help his son fulfill fate's decrees, especially by guiding Aeneas through the underworld and showing him what fate has in store for his descendant. And next is Ascanius, Aeneas' young son by his first wife Creusa. Ascanius, also called Iulus, is most important as a symbol of Aeneas' destiny, his future founding of the Roman race. Though still a child, Ascanius has several opportunities over the course of the epic to display his bravery and leadership. Next is Creusa, Aeneas' wife at Troy and the mother of Ascanius. Creusa is lost and killed as her family attempts to flee the city, but tells Aeneas he will find a new wife and his new home. Next is Dido, the queen of Carthage, a city in northern Africa in what is now Tunisia, and lover of Aeneas. Dido left the land of Tyre when her husband was murdered by Pygmalion, her brother. She and her city are strong, but she becomes an unfortunate pawn of the gods in their struggle for Aeneas' destiny. Her love for Aeneas proves to be her downfall. After he abandons her, she constructs a funeral pyre and stabs herself upon it with Aeneas' sword. Next is Pallas, son of Evander, whom Evander entrusts to Aeneas' care and tutelage. Pallas eventually dies in the battle at the hands of Turnus, causing Aeneas and Evander great grief. To avenge Pallas' death, Aeneas finally slays Turnus, dismissing an initial impulse to spare him. Next is Lavinia. He is important only as the object of the Trojan-Latin struggle. Next is Turnus, the ruler of the Rutulians in Italy. Turnus is Aeneas' major antagonist among mortals. He is Lavinia's living suitor until Aeneas arrives. This rivalry incites him to wage war against the Trojans. Despite Latinus' willingness to allow the Trojans to settle in Latium, the Turnus understanding that he cannot successfully defy fate. He is brash and fearless, a capable soldier who values his honor over his life. And lastly, Venus, the goddess of love and the mother of Aeneas. Venus, as I said a while ago, Aphrodite in Greek mythology, is a benefactor of the Trojans. She helps her son whenever June tries to hurt him, causing conflict among the gods. She is also referred to as Cytherea, after Cytherea, the island where she was born and where her shrine is located. Next is the setting of the story. The story happened at the Mediterranean, including the north coast of Asia Minor, Carthage, and Italy, in the aftermath of the Trojan War about 1000 BC. Genre of the story: heroic epics and mythological story. The tone of the story is that the epic is respectful and honorific when it comes to addressing the glory of Rome. As Vergil describes the victims of history, those who, like Dido, have suffered during the establishment of Rome, and his tone is sad and compassionate. The motives of the story are prophecies and predictions, founding a new city, and vengeance. Next is the symbolism included in the story. So Vergil uses symbolism to conjure a series of mythological, historical, and emotional relations in the Aeneid. So the first symbol is fire. In the poem, fire is an uncontrollable force that symbolizes both destruction and inspiration. This literally kills Troy and damages Sicily's Trojan ships, and it is figuratively used to characterize the fury of war that obscures even the reasonable thought and compassion of Aeneas. Dido's passion for Aeneas leads her to suicide. The sorrow of Palatium over the death of Pallas is likewise symbolized by flames. On the other hand, fire is a sign of destiny and inspiration. The second symbol is the golden bow. The golden bow is indicative of the exceptional and tragic fate of Aeneas. He must locate and pluck the bow to reach the underworld, and he will only be able to do so if fate permits it. His connection to the bow was already decided, as was his fate. The golden bow allows him entry to the realm of the dead, which is generally forbidden to those who are not deceased, of course, making him only the few extraordinary individuals to have joined it while still living. The third symbol is Shield of Aeneas. The great shield created for Aeneas by the fire god Vulcan is graved with details of Roman history that have not yet occurred in the time span of the epic. Since such events occurred in the time of Vergil, they are unavoidable as the future of Aeneas. The shield serves as a sign of Rome's fate and the future of Aeneas. This also guarantees the tragic fate of Aeneas by defending him in battle. The shields of other men, including those Pallas and Turnus, collapse, causing them to harm or kill, but Aeneas' shield protects him without damage. The last symbol is the Gates of War. The Gates of War were the entrances to Janus Shrine, or the god of the gates in Rome. During warfare, they were opened symbolically and closed in times of calm. In Book 7, Vergil places the Latium in an early version of the Gates of War. King Latinus, waffling between Queen Amata, Turnus, and the citizen of clamoring to Aeneas for war and his promise of peace. hesitates to open the gates of war and begin the conflict. As Juno takes the decision out of his hands and flings the gates open, all Italy blazed. In Book 1, Jupiter declares that the gates of war were meant to be sealed, symbolizing the long and So in the themes of the story, first is glorification of Rome, faith, divine intervention, patriotism, humanity, familial relationships, piety, war and peace, destiny of Rome, vengeance, predictions, and heroism. And lastly, the foreshadowing. The dramatic historical incidents are already history from the Roman people. The many visions and prophecies of various characters show a hidden future to humans, which are the best foreshadowing type of the epic. Often when Turnus kills Pallas, Vergil foreshadows the death of Turnus himself. And that is all for this video lecture. I hope you've learned a lot in this video, and thank you for listening. Have a good day!